A week ago, my husband brought home a girl who was around 5 years old and told me that he'd adopted her. That came as quite a shock to me since we'd literally never even discussed anything of the sort, and raising a child was a huge commitment, too. He told me that she's the daughter of one of his friends who passed away recently, and when I asked him which friend it was, he told me that I wouldn't know him, which was quite fishy. Nevertheless, after a few days of arguing back and forth, I finally accepted the fact that now we had a daughter. I like kids, and even though this was a surprise, I'd warmed up to the girl. She was really quiet and shy, so she spent most of her time in her room playing or watching something on TV and only came out at meal times, which allowed me to work in peace as well during the day. However, my husband has also been strangely quiet after he brought home the child as well, and it's been pretty suspicious. A few hours ago, I was going through the child's duffel bag so that I could take out all the clothes and help her settle in. And that's when I found a picture tucked away inside it really carefully, underneath all the clothes. It was a picture taken a few years ago, probably judging by how old the girl was. And to my surprise, I saw my husband's ex girlfriend holding the child in her arms and another man whom I didn't recognize. That's when it all added up. Finally, for a week, I've been living with my husband's ex girlfriend's daughter and raising her like my own because my husband told me to. I was shocked and didn't even know what to do about this for a good few minutes. As soon as I had my wits about me again, I decided to call my husband up and ask him about this whole thing. When he didn't answer, I decided to call my mother in law instead. My mother in law is a religious woman and refuses to lie to avoid sinning, so I knew for a fact that I would count on her to tell me the truth if she knew what was happening. So I called her up and she did tell me the truth, which ended up ruining my marriage. The second I asked her what was really happening, she started sounding really nervous and sad and told me that while she was ready to tell me what her son had told her, she wanted me to react calmly and think things through before doing anything rash. I knew I was in for something really bad as soon as she said that and prepared myself mentally for the worst. She told me that a week ago my husband had come to her first asking if she'd be able to adopt the girl and raise her, but she had to decline with a heavy heart since she's too old and falls sick often. She needs someone to take care of her at her age, so she can't commit to taking care of another child anymore. And when she asked him about whose child it was anyway, he broke down and confessed that it was his daughter. He said that he'd cheated on me with his already married ex. They'd covered it up successfully, though since he'd acted like nothing had happened and put it out of his mind, and his ex had told her husband that she was pregnant and he was the father, which he readily believed. They spent the last 5 years with minimal contact, and he'd only ask about his daughter once in a while when they met for coffee. He's always regretted what happened and made it very clear that he loved me and not his ex while he was talking about this. And he'd had to adopt her since a couple of days ago he found out that his ex and her husband had unfortunately passed away in a car accident, and his daughter was living with her uncle, his ex's younger brother, who happened to know the truth. Her uncle was the one who'd contacted my husband and arranged for him to take her with him and raise her as his own, since that's what his ex would have wanted. And besides, his ex's brother was way too young to be able to commit to raising a child, so this was his best bet anyway. After explaining the whole story to me, my mother in law practically begged me to not do anything rash or impulsive, but I cut her off mid sentence and said, "Thanks for telling me the whole story so truthfully," and hung up. I was furious that my husband had done such a thing and expected me to just sit back and do whatever he asked of me. And moreover, he cheated on me, which was absolutely unforgivable to me. And to think that I would have never found out about any of this had I not stumbled upon that picture in their daughter's clothes and called my mother in law up to find out about the truth. It's just baffling to me that my husband actually thought that he'd get away with this as well. What I did next was the most practical thing that occurred to me, to be honest. I was fuming, but I knew that I wasn't going to do anything that would put the girl in danger since she had literally no hand in any of this, and I had nothing against the poor kid. I also needed some time to cool off, and I didn't want to be around her for the time being, but I wanted my husband to know how disappointed and betrayed I was feeling. So before leaving, I wanted to do something big and noticeable. I just wanted to be petty and vengeful to make my husband feel like crap, the way I was feeling. I went to our shared bedroom and took my anger out on his belongings. I tore some of his clothes, threw his precious watches in the trash, and then smashed the framed photograph we had of our wedding day to the floor. Having done all of that, I felt a little relieved and decided to leave. So I packed some of my clothes and essentials along with his daughter's stuff and drove to a friend's house, dropped his daughter off, and then I drove for as long as I could until I felt calmer. I was a little out of town, and that's when my husband called me, asking where I'd gone. He sounded solemn and serious, and I knew that he'd seen what had happened in the bedroom. I told him that I'd spoken to his mother and now I knew everything, so I didn't want to speak to him right now. There was half a minute of complete silence, and I expected him to start sobbing or at least apologize. But instead, he just asked me where his daughter was, and I told him that she was with a friend of mine right now. Then he said that I needed to come back home with her so that we could talk things through like a family. But we weren't really a family anymore. I wasn't his daughter's mother, and I didn't feel like being his wife right now either. There was another minute of silence where none of us had anything to say, and then he told me that I was being incredibly selfish for leaving and that I needed to start acting like an adult instead of a rage-fueled teenager. He hung up after that, and I was shocked that he even had the audacity to call me selfish after what he'd done to me. I was so pissed off that I stopped by a hotel nearby since I felt as though my head was actually about to explode from anger. I don't know what to do or what to say right now. My husband literally ruined our marriage and broke my trust, and he thinks I'm the one who's being unreasonable and selfish. He kept something so huge, a secret from me, and I don't know if I can just forgive or forget that. I'm still just really pissed off about everything, so I don't know if I can trust my judgment about what's right and what's wrong, which is why I'm here. So AITA for messing up my husband's belongings and then driving away after I found out that he'd brought home his ex's daughter, whom he'd cheated on me with? Update 1. 2 days have passed since my last conversation with my husband, and he's not checked up on me yet. All he's done is send a text saying that he's ready to talk to me when I'm feeling less resentful and that he forgives me for destroying his stuff, which is really just so condescending. He forgives me? Ridiculous. But anyway, now that my anger has cooled down a little, all I feel is depressed. I've spent the last decade of my life with this man, and now I don't even know if any of it was even worth it or not. I'm obviously pretty shattered about the whole thing, and I'm considering a divorce even though I haven't made up my mind yet. On one hand, I still want to go back to him and forgive him for whatever he's done. But on the other hand, I don't know if I can ever trust him again. Now that I think about it carefully, there have been several instances over the past few years where I've noticed that my husband used to go on work trips quite frequently, even when his coworkers swore that they didn't know anything about what he was working on that required him to leave. And in addition to that, I also remember asking him about significant amounts of money that he used to take out of our joint savings account. But he always said that he needed it for his mom, even when she seemed to be in perfect health. I never asked him or dug deeper into any of that because that's just how much I trusted him. But now I know that it probably was all for his daughter. And I also know now why he was so vehemently against having a child with me as well, since in the initial years of our marriage I wanted a baby. But he said he wasn't ready yet. So we kept putting it off, and eventually I just accepted that maybe my husband just didn't want kids at all, and made my peace with it as well. Despite all of this, I never once suspected anything because I had blind faith in him. Now, all that's gone, and I don't know if he can say or do anything at all to restore that faith anymore. And the sad part is that he's not even trying, since he hasn't even tried to apologize for anything. And who's to say that he hooked up with his ex only once? It could have happened multiple times, and I'll never know. Obviously, I can't live in the hotel indefinitely and will have to head out soon, but I absolutely don't want to go back home. So I guess I'll have to ask some of my friends to let me crash at their place until I'm able to make up my mind about what I want to do next about this situation. Update 2. I finally went home, or what used to be home, yesterday. I couldn't hide out in the hotel anymore since I still had to run my business and I'd left a lot of things at home. I walked in to see his daughter playing in the living room. She seemed happy to see me, and it broke my heart that I couldn't be with her. I'd actually started loving her company during the 1 week that I'd spent with her. I work from home, so I spent the majority of my time last week either playing with her or working, so it was quite natural to form a bond with her. And truth be told, she seemed to be more attached to me than my husband because she even asked me where I'd been. My husband was also at home and seemed to be quite nervous. After I played around a little with his daughter, I went into our bedroom to pack up all my things. It was hard, but I'd made up my mind to move out and file for divorce since I really couldn't just go back to acting like we were a happily married couple after he'd hidden something so big from me for so long. When he saw me packing, my husband seemed confused and asked me why I was packing, since he'd assumed I'd forgiven him and come back for good. Obviously, that was not what was happening here, and I told him that. He didn't take that well and started panicking, saying that I couldn't just leave him over something like this. So we ended up getting into a nasty argument, and I finally let out 3 days' worth of anger. I told him that all the faith I had in him was just gone, and I don't think I can ever trust him again, so there's no point in trying to make this work. Moreover, he didn't even attempt to apologize to me while I was gone, which just showed how little he cared about me and my feelings. My husband was acting really defensive and was trying to downplay the seriousness of the whole situation, saying that it was just one time and he considered it a mistake, but he didn't realize that I was hurt about a lot of things, not just the cheating. I told him that I didn't feel like explaining myself since he just wouldn't understand anyway, so it was better for us to part ways. Once again, he accused me of being selfish and not caring for him, and I told him that I was just treating him the same way he treated me. So he shouldn't be too surprised. I left with all my stuff, and while I was leaving, I pecked his daughter on the forehead since she looked upset about all of this. That was yesterday, and since then, he's been trying to call me and talk to me, but it's too late. I'm living with a friend of mine for now. Honestly, I just feel relieved that it's done now. The only thing I regret is having to leave the child behind since none of this is her fault. Update 3. Almost a week has passed since the last update, and 2 days ago, my lawyer and I filed for divorce. My husband is devastated, to say the least, and tried every emotional trick in the book to try and get me to stay. He said that I would regret throwing away all these years of marriage and togetherness over one little mistake, and that I needed to think about the good times instead of just focusing on the cheating. But that didn't work. And so he started talking about how he won't be able to raise his daughter by himself and she needed a mother too. This is when I conceded and said that I was willing to co parent his daughter, even though she wasn't my blood, simply because I didn't want her to suffer. I don't think he'd seen that coming and started arguing with me on call, saying that I couldn't just claim ownership of his daughter and that if I wanted to raise her, then I'd have to stop the divorce proceedings and come back home. Obviously, I wasn't going to do that, but I did think that his daughter deserved a better life and, quite frankly, a better parent to raise her. And so I went against my lawyer's advice and decided to fight for joint custody of his daughter as well. I don't know how that'll work out for me since I'm obviously not her bio mom, but I feel attached to her already and I think that I could be a better parent to her than my husband. I mean, I've already spent more time with her than my husband did. He's obviously furious that I'm doing such a thing and has been demanding that I stop the legal proceedings and just go back to him instead of breaking our family apart. Ironically, he's accusing me of doing so when he's the one who cheated. But nevertheless, So far, I haven't responded to any of his calls or texts except the last one I intend to keep in that way. Now, anything that he has to say will be said in the presence of both our attorneys because I'm not willing to speak to him or discuss anything one on one with him anymore. I'm sure he's going to do all of that in his power to prevent this divorce and custody battle, but I'm willing to fight back as well. I deserve to be happy. And more importantly, I deserve to have the life that I missed out on for so long because I was so busy pleasing my cheating husband instead. Update 4. My husband decided to pay me a visit at my friend's house last night. It's been close to 2 weeks since I filed for divorce, and while he's been trying to speak to me relentlessly, it's just not happening. He's decided to go ahead and contest the divorce petition, which I knew was going to happen, so I'm not too surprised. However, I was pretty shocked to see him show up at my friend's doorstep. I didn't bother to invite him in since it wasn't my house anyway, but he was just waiting around and trying to make small talk with me, and it was getting awkward, so my friend called him in. Once he was seated, he finally apologized for everything that was happening and sort of broke down. My husband isn't a generally emotional guy, so it was alarming to see him start sobbing like that. My friend left the room to give us some privacy, and despite all my anger and hurt, I comforted him and tried to console him at that moment. I could feel tears streaming down my face as well, and for a good 5 minutes, the two of us just sat there and let our tears flow. After a while, when he'd finally composed himself, he apologized to me once again and said that while he'd cheated on me once, he'd never done so ever again. Cheating on me and then having to lie to me so that he could cover it up had been eating away at him for all these years. And while he regretted it all and wished that he'd just been honest about it, he was still relieved that this huge secret that he'd been carrying around for all these years. He told me that I was doing the right thing by filing for divorce and he was just struggling to come to terms with the fact that his marriage was over now. It was hard for me as well to watch him completely break down in front of me, and I almost began to consider putting an end to the divorce proceedings altogether and getting back with him instead. But I knew that that would just lead to more problems for the both of us eventually, so it was best that we parted ways amicably and tried to move on instead of going back to what we were stuck in. He was carrying around the burden of such a huge lie, and I was too busy forcing myself to be happy and in love to see that our marriage was slowly unraveling. I guess the cheating incident was a reality check for both of us. After the whole episode last night, my husband told me that he was not going to contest the divorce anymore and was also ready to go ahead with joint custody of his daughter since even he believed that I would be a better mother than him as a father. And before he left, he reminded me that whether I trusted him or not, he still loved me and would work on himself so that he could become a better person who actually deserved to be with someone like me. So that was pretty touching. Anyway, I was an emotional wreck after that, and I'm still feeling pretty drained mentally after everything that's been happening. I'm just glad that I won't have to deal with some long, drawn out legal process anymore. Thanks to my husband's emotional awakening, I just want this to be over with so that I can try to move on somehow. Update 5. Hi, I know this update is long overdue, so I'll try to cover everything that's happened in the past month. After my husband finally broke down and apologized, he also decided to take back his decision to contest the divorce. And that effectively ended our marriage. The divorce is going to be finalized in a few months, and then we'll both legally be single again. However, as we discussed earlier, we'll be co parenting our daughter. I'm saying our because honestly, it just felt wrong to say his. She's old enough to understand that her biological mother isn't in this world anymore, and we're the ones who are going to be taking care of her now. So we decided to find a therapist for her so she can deal with her feelings and emotions, and it seems to be working. She's opening up slowly and gradually and becoming more talkative. So that's great news for us. My husband and I sold the house and bought apartments that are a few blocks away from each other so that while we're not exactly neighbors, we can still drop by, and it's not too long a journey for our daughter. She lives with me for 1 week and with her dad for the next, and we also try to ensure that we have dinner together as a family at least once or twice a week. My mother in law also drops by once in a while, and although she isn't quite happy about this living arrangement, she's made her peace with it. And I'm also thankful to her for not lying to me so that she could cover her son. As for me and my husband, we're both in therapy and are trying to cope with the divorce and our feelings since obviously both of us still love each other. The divorce didn't make the love I had for him just disappear into thin air like I'd expected. But at the same time, it's not a good idea for us to be together right now. I'm just focused on being a good mother to my daughter and my job. That's all that matters to me right now. Maybe someday I'll be able to forgive my husband and we can be a happy family, but right now, I'm content with where I am in my life. Stay tuned for more stories from Argo Relationships.